everyone. I'm Jon Evans. Welcome to another episode of One on One. In the world of bicycle motocross, or BMX, not many people can match the success that Ryan Nyquist has had. He has won 3 world championships, he's won several gold medals in the X Games, and that career has spanned more than 2 decades. Now, Ryan is going to be front and center again as the sport of BMX Freestyle takes what many call its biggest step forward since the X Games. It's going to be a gold medal sport in the 2020 Summer Olympic Games in Tokyo, and Ryan Nyquist is going to coach the very first U.S. Olympic BMX Freestyle team. The married father of 3 who now lives in Wilmington is promising one awesome show. Ryan Nyquist, 3-time world champion, gold medalist in the X Games, husband, father, and soon-to-be Olympic head coach. Welcome to the One on One with Jon Evans podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You are undoubtedly the most decorated guest that I have had in the 3 years that I've been here. We're going to get to all your career highlights in a moment. You moved to Wilmington, North Carolina last year. Since then, there have been 2 hurricanes. Mm-hmm. At any point in time during either one of those storms, was there a, man, I'm going to rethink this a little bit?
No, it's funny, is before we moved here, and I think we're on year number 2 now, so yeah, we asked around, like, how is it, we knew hurricanes. I lived in Greenville, North Carolina, right. So hurricanes meant more of just a party over there. It wasn't like a, duck and cover kind of situation, but I was like, how is it? We're on the coast. Like, are we endangered? And like, that never happens. Never happens. Right. And then sure enough, we get 2, and they're, thankfully this one wasn't as bad as the previous year. But no, that was an experience. I come from California where the earthquakes kind of hit like a snap of a finger. So it was really odd having that sense of warning, like a week before. It's like, well, it's coming. Yeah. And then 3 days before, it's like, it's still coming. And then you start going like, okay, is it going to come at us? And so it was a different adjustment for natural disasters for me, but yeah, still interesting. And like I said, I'm thankful because it seemed like this last one damage was minimal compared to the year before.
How did you do during Florence? I mean, Florence was the storm beyond storms for those of us like myself who have been here for almost 3 decades. Mm-hmm. We've seen heavy windstorms. That one just parked itself right here and didn't go anywhere. How did your family do?
Yeah, and so that was our first hurricane experience. And so I'm sitting there going like, wow, this is really crazy. And it's lasted for a while. And so it wasn't until afterwards they were like, no, that was really rare that just sat here for a whole day. So we did fine. We were kind of on the verge of leaving or staying. We decided to stay. And I'm thankful we did because we didn't personally get a lot of damage, but we got to see firsthand kind of what it's about, and the winds and the trees moving and some breaking and all that. It was educational, and I don't want to ever put my family at risk, but I also like knowing what's happening, So if one does come, we can kind of rate it. Florence was a 1. Okay, well that was a 1. This one was a 2. Like we could probably do 1s and 2s, 3s. I don't know. We'll probably have another discussion, Yeah. But we're learning as we go. But personally, we got very minimal damage. Really, we got nothing. So that was I'm grateful for that. We had some neighbors that had trees fall, But the thing I love about those situations is, every chainsaw in the neighborhood started firing up. People were outside in the rain, chopping stuff down, helping people out, cleaning up. And so that was a really cool bonding experience for our neighborhood, and one that I hadn't had before in any neighborhoods we'd ever lived in. So to have that, and then moving forward was like we were all ready. Like hurricane coming, okay, let's go. Everybody got gasoline,
got the supplies,
got the bar oil going. We're good to go. So
how did the kids do? Obviously, being almost 40 now, you've had life experiences that they haven't. Mm-hmm. Was there fear? Did you have to explain to them anything? Because you're learning at the same time. Yeah,
so we did explain there was a storm coming. They're young enough where it's like, oh, storm, like what is that? What does that mean? And so we kind of told them, like, there's a hurricane. And, so I think in some senses it's fun for them because A, they get out of school, so it's like, yay. And then B, we kind of like end up sleeping all in one area. So it's kind of like a slumber party. And I'm not a work kind of guy. Like I take things as they come, and if it's pretty serious, then we react to it. And so with them, I explain it very straightforward, and I go, well, so we're gonna figure it out. And they're like, well, is it gonna be bad? I was like, I don't think it's gonna be bad, So, but if it does get bad, then we explain it. We just move, and it's like I don't get very hysterical about stuff a lot of times. So, try to stay calm, try to explain it to them so they don't get like frazzled and freak out. But no, like I said, like this last one was really chill. So like really, it just felt like we were all just sleeping together. Like, we had the mattress off the beds. Yeah, pretty much. And then they have all their devices, so they're just head downs like for like 3 days straight, doing their thing. So, but it was good. And like I said, like came out unscathed. The next day was beautiful, so it was just like they hopped outside like nothing ever had happened. So
yeah, so you can add hurricane veteran now to your resume.
If 2 means I'm a veteran, then I'm okay with that.
Why did you pick Wilmington, North Carolina? You've been from Greenville, you moved back and forth from the West Coast originally, then you had to move back for a little while. What led you to pick Wilmington?
So we thought of a lot of different locations. We looked at Colorado, we looked at Virginia Beach for a split second, but I met my wife, Allie, in Greenville. And so North Carolina had a very special place in our hearts, and it really came down to the people, honestly. Like Greenville was a great place, but the people of North Carolina always made it really nice, and it was warm, and you walk down the street, people wave, and it's genuine, And California, it's not necessarily like that. It's different. There's a hustle and bustle that I wasn't involved in for my career. And so while we liked it there and we loved the scenery and everything that comes to California, we kind of were just always thinking like, maybe we should go somewhere. Maybe we should move. Maybe we should try something different. And so we went back and visited Greenville again. It just didn't seem like a good fit with, the stage we're at in life. My wife also really wanted to start like her own, like indoor cycling studio. And so we kind of took that into like consideration as well. And so, I'll just say the big factor was, honestly, she was like, I really want to live by the beach. So Colorado was out instantly. There's no beach there. Yeah. Virginia Beach was cool. We had a friend up there, but then we really quickly kind of like vetoed that one out. And then she was like, well, what about Wilmington? And I was like, I've heard nothing but great stuff. I've only gone a couple times, but it was for riding. So, we should probably revisit and just maybe go out there. So she came out with her parents. I came out with her. We did a couple trips, and we just slowly realized, it was like, yeah, this is a really good community. It's good for the kids, the schooling, everything, and then for her studio, which is Amplify, we're up in right. Porter's Creek or Porter's Neck. There wasn't really anything like that, and so it kind of like ticked a lot of the boxes that we needed to kind of relocate. And so we just kind of like sat down and wrote a bunch of stuff on paper and pros and cons, and we're like, yeah, sounds good, let's do it.
How did this community allow you to continue your career? This isn't known as a big biking mecca. Yeah. So how did you have to adjust? Because you had the unit up in Greenville, which was the iconic place up there that you'd been to and been owners of. But how did you continue your career here? Was it a real challenge for you?
It was at first. A lot of the things that we deal with is finding people to ride with. And usually when you show up to a skate park, you meet people instantly, people on bikes, people on skateboards, and like I said, North Carolina people are just so friendly that's like, it's not hard to make friends, but you still have to go there and do it, so places like Greenfield Skate Park, Ogden, there's a couple, some local ramps just outside of Wilmington and stuff like that, so like you kind of like make the rounds and start like meeting people and make connections. And so just through that, and I had some friends that had moved here from like when we all lived in Greenville, so kind of budding up with them and them introducing me, and it's like the original social media. It's like you make friends with somebody, and then their friends you're friends with, and that's kind of how it unfolded. And eventually I just ended up building some stuff in my own yard so I could kind of maintain. But really, it was just like I was kind of driving between Wilmington and Greenville for a lot of my training stuff to just kind of keep up with what I was trying to do.
Do you think Wilmington can be, or you're going to try to make it one? Let me ask a question. What does it need to become a bigger biking home?
Well, I mean, with all the Olympic stuff going on, having like a skate park at that level would be super helpful, and I've talked to people that are interested in doing like pump tracks, which is awesome for like the younger kids where they can just go out there and ride and kind of get introduced. And then we have 2 great skate parks, but I think, the way Wilmington is growing, it's like the people coming in, like it's a perfect time to try to invest in doing something on this level. And being that I'm the coach of the Olympic team for BMX Freestyle, it's like, we're starting to bring in events to Wilmington. We had, we call it like a C1, which is a lower level, but it was given the first Olympic points out for that whole process. Yeah. So that was a pretty important thing. And there's a local guy, Paul, who basically has been like heading up the organization, and he's been killing it. So we're looking at doing another event here in December that will be giving away these really important Olympic points. So it's just that kind of stuff is really helpful to growing it as like a spot. And I think having myself here, I have my own personal ramp, so I'm constantly bringing in like potential Olympic athletes to come and train. So when we have those facilities and you have those people that really want to grow it and like, you know, from the grassroots up, that's like where it really starts making like a really push, you know. So there's a really great scene in Raleigh. It's 2 hours away. I would love to see it somewhere close by here because I feel like it just kind of fits with the culture of like surf, you know, like a great town. It's, you know, we have great weather pretty much all year long. It's just, you know, it kind of all works. So it's just, why not do some more?
Tell me the story about the unit, and could something like that exist here?
Yeah, so the unit, I'll give a little background for people to know. It was my own private skate park that I made in Greenville, North Carolina. And it was indoors, inside a warehouse, which is great, you know, for when it did sprinkle, you were, you know, sheltered. It was rough during the summertime because I didn't have the AC. I didn't splurge for the AC or the heating. So, you know, winter, summer were the extremes. But it was just, it was something that I was like, I'm only going to do this once, you know, so I wanted to do it as best I could. And I think it got voted the second best skate park in the world at one point. And it was just a really special thing because when you have something like that, you can do events. You have people that move to the town because you have an amazing skate park, something that has all the training facilities you need, all the training ramps. And it's just, I don't know, it creates this kind of community where people can come and just be out of the weather. They can hone in their skills. They can focus on what they want to do. And a lot of times, spots like that actually kind of like bring the locals to another level too. Yeah. There was a rider named Josh Harrington who lived in Greenville, and by happenstance, that's where like a ton of the pros moved. He ended up being like one of the most talented, you know, BMX riders, especially in the streets, like, you know, that pretty much ever lived. And it was like, okay, that's crazy because he was born and bred there, you know? So it's like, I could see something like that happening in Wilmington where someone that may not have those facilities, but all of a sudden something got built here, like, it'd be incredible because it just brings that, I don't know, like brings the talent out and brings people to that next level, you know? And
raises the level of expectation almost.
It does, and also it just gives them a platform, you know? And sometimes that's also a person needs, is to be given that platform to try to just do better, you know? And some people, they use it and they succeed and they blossom, and other people, they don't. But it's just like, if that's not there in the first place, you'll never know.
I want to talk about how you got into BMX and everything, but I do want to address, and congratulations, by the way, being the head coach of the first U.S. BMX Freestyle team going to the Olympics. I think that's, I mean, congratulations to you. Is there any concern about being one of the athletes and then all of a sudden being the head coach? Because anytime you go from one level within the same thing to a manager or coach, there's maybe a little bit of, you know, rubbing heads.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a concern, but as far as like the rubbing heads, I think I was at a point in my career where like a lot of the younger riders knew who I was and what I had done of sorts, but I was never like, I don't know, it was never like, I felt like I was really that competitive where I was bumping heads. Like, we're all pretty good friends out there. Obviously, there's the rare thing where it's just like nobody gets along with this guy or he doesn't get along. But like, for the most part, we're all pretty good. And I always kind of felt like I fell into that like kind of father figure role, whether it be helping people figure out their runs or with tricks or even just like as being professional, you know? Like, I've been around long enough to where I know kind of how it works and what people should be doing. And so it was funny because when I was kind of like applying for the job and talking to them, I said, well, I've been competing against a lot of these guys, so I know their weaknesses. And so when I rolled over into coach, those weaknesses, instead of kind of like focusing in on how I could take advantage of that, it became like, well, how do I fix that now? And so it wasn't that big of an adjustment for me because I could just basically turn and say like, hey, listen, I noticed that like your runs fizzle out at 20 seconds. Like, you have 60 seconds and you got to either space yourself out or like, you know, just give them tips upon stuff that I was seeing, that I was being able to like kind of be like, okay, well, he might have like 3 big tricks, but he's going to fizzle. So if I do 60, I'm going to beat him, you know? So at this point now, it's like turning it and then trying to help this next generation, you know, basically reach those same goals and dreams that I had, you know, but even bigger, because the Olympics was just a bit out of my reach as an athlete. But to be able to coach these people and basically help them kind of like hopefully to be able to achieve their dreams, if it's not this Olympics, the next one, you know, that's an amazing opportunity for me and something that I'm actually very passionate about. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be super passionate about it because I was so focused on being an athlete. But I started coaching the women first because there was like no conflict of interest. It was just like I could still compete, but, you know, help them coach. And I began just loving it. Like, it was really, really cool. And I didn't know that was going to happen, but when it was like, I was finding a lot of joy in helping people, like, just plan runs, get over fear, you know, like relating to things that I've gone through and then being able to pass along to them. And I was like, this is really cool. Like, it's a really rare opportunity, but a very, I don't know, just fulfilling one for myself. Like, so now that I'm like the head coach of like the men and women, it's like, okay, well now I can really kind of pass down that knowledge to the guys too and be like, hey, listen, like I did this. I made that mistake. Here's how I got out of it. I had to learn the hard way. Let's give you that boost so you don't have to do it the hard way.
I think it's interesting how every 4 years, everybody all of a sudden gets excited about curling again. And you know, these sports that come up once every 4 years. Those of us who have seen BMX grow the way it has grown in the last 30 years, we know maybe a little bit more of the ins and outs. But for somebody who may be watching it next year for the very first time, what should they watch for? What is a good performance of a BMX freestyle?
It's going to be one of those things where if you don't know a lot about the sport, a lot of these tricks are going to seem like some guy just went in the air with a bike and things flew around and all of a sudden he was back on the pedals riding away. But really, to me, it's if the run is action-packed the entire way through. And what that comes down to is, like, how did they plan the run? And they have complete freedom. It's basically 60 seconds on this course, and they can use the course any which way they want, any tricks they want to do. So you really get this true sense of what freestyle is, because one rider may ride it completely different from the other. But what it always comes down to is difficulty, how like action-packed it is, and if they're just like, if you see a guy flying through the air pretty much the entire 60 seconds, he's barely on the ground, that's probably going to be a pretty good run, you know?
Really?
So there's a lot of technical stuff that comes along with it, but really for me, what I try to tell everybody is just like, use the entire 60 seconds. Because if you cut yourself short and you can possibly fit in another trick, that's just one more point on the judge's tablet that you can be like, okay, like that is my best chance of like doing well, you know? But if I've seen in the past a lot of guys will like at 15 seconds just like start throwing the really easy tricks to like salvage the run. I'm like, well, when it comes to the Olympics, like there is no salvaging, because if you lay up, this next guy is going to see that and he's going to pounce on it.
Where are the best riders from? Are they from
USA?
the United States?
Come on, man.
Well, I know that, but
No.
but those of us who haven't seen overseas or international competitions.
Yeah, so right now, I mean, in the overall standings, we're in a pretty dead heat with Australia. Australia in the past decade has had some amazing riders come out of it that have just really pushed the limits. But the US, Australia, I think you're going to see a lot of talent coming out of the UK. And then there's a lot of just like individual riders coming from smaller countries, like Daniel Dares from Venezuela. He lives actually in Raleigh area. There's another rider out of Croatia, Costa Rica. So there's a lot, and then Russia has like a handful of really good riders as well. So, you know, you're going to have your major heavy hitter countries that, you know, typically do well in most sports, but then you're going to have these like kind of one-off people that have like really worked hard to like get to where they're at and get a spot in the Olympics as well.
When did you first ride a bicycle? What's your first memory of riding, and the first time you may have seen a BMX rider?
Yeah, so I learned how to ride a bike when I was 3 years old, and then shortly after that was like, you know, the plywood on some bricks that you launch in the grass, and I always just loved, you know, being on two wheels. It was just, I don't know what it was, but it just caught me at a very early age and never really let go. And so into middle school, into high school, I did 1 year of college and realized that I was way too into the BMX, and it was really starting to pick up for me, so I decided to step away from college to do that. So it kind of snowballed relatively fast for me, and then, you know, continued to snowball until, you know, here I am 40 years old. But the very first time I remember seeing like BMX freestyle like in real life was, there was like a demo that was going on at like a church fair or something like that, and they had a show team out there, and they had like all these fluorescent, you know, pink bikes and green bikes, and they were doing all this cool stuff. And I remember vividly going like, that is so cool. Like, and I can't even tell you what age I was, but it was probably like 5 or 6 years old, because it's like, it's, you know, like when you have that far back memory, it's like it's a very short, like a couple seconds of what you remember, and that's what I kind of have in my head, was just like this image of this bike that was like white and green or pink, but like, you know, they were all dressed up, and I was like, that's really cool.
I could do that.
I want to do it. Like, just give me a bike, you know. So, and my older brother was actually got like a freestyle bike, and so he was a major influence on me trying to get into that as well. So it was just kind of like this culmination of loving being on two wheels, you know, instantly wanting to jump the thing, and then my older brother getting like this kind of freestyle bike, and then me getting like which is funny, my first real freestyle bike is a brand that I still ride for, Haro. Mm-hmm. So it's like kind of weird how life works it out, but you know, to have that as my first bike and then end up riding for them for 20 plus years, like it's pretty cool.
Do you remember the first move you performed?
Yeah, it wasn't anything spectacular. I think it was probably like a kick out where you just kind of kick your back end out or bring it in, or a one-hander. You know, it was really, really basic.
But you were doing it at that point.
Oh, yeah. And I remember my first crash very vividly. That I will never forget.
Where was that?
In California, this place called Calabasas, and it was it'd been around for generations, and it was basically a dried out creek bed, and they built some jumps that would just kind of go into it and then jump out, right? And I remember trying to just get the courage up to hit this one jump, and I finally was like, all right. And you know, the local, you know, I call them grown-ups at the time, they're probably like 15, you know, they're like, you got this. And I was like, okay, and just launch off of it, and didn't get the nose in, so like, you know, kind of landed back tire, landed in a wheelie, and then basically just really wheelied, landed on my back, on my rear end, and just like knocked the air out of myself, you know, and it happened like that. So all of a sudden I'm on the ground, can't breathe, and everybody's like looking around me, and that's just like, wow, okay. But it's funny because moments like that, and I've had those moments like with my own kids where you have a really hard crash doing something, and you kind of wait and see how they react. Like, are they going to walk away from the bike and never want to touch it again? Or are they going to, you know, get the tears out, bring the breathing back to normal, and then try to do it again?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what did you do? You probably took about 10 or 15 seconds and then hop right back
on. I mean, I took a little bit longer, but I got back on the bike. It took me a little while to get back to riding that jump again just because the fear was there. But once I broke through that fear and came back with some better skills, it was like, it wasn't that big a deal. But it was that moment for me where I was like, you know, this is something I really want to do. Like, it hurts. Like, there's a lot of pain involved with it. But like, if I can push past that and persevere, like, then yeah, like, I'm gonna get a lot more enjoyment out of it. And that's kind of been my entire career, is, you know, like, it's, you crash, you get back up, you know, and that's a pretty important life lesson too, is, you know, when you fall down, you fail, like, being able to get back up and keep going, you know. And so I learned that through BMX at a young age, and it's fared me really well just in life.
I was gonna say, you probably have that memory, but what other memories, you've had such a successful career, what other memories just stick out as being key for your growth? I mean, you've got the first medals, you've got the first world championship, but are there points where you looked at it and it was a major accomplishment that just boosted you forward, made you want to do more?
I think like the first big moment where I was like, well, this is really crazy that this is happening was like my first X Games appearance was in 1997. You know, I was fresh out of high school, and I was just like, okay, like, went there, and at the time it was really crazy because I got a spot to ride. At the time it was called street, but it's basically like a park course, similar to what the Olympics would be on. And my background was completely in dirt jumping though, so I kind of asked, I was like, well, could I ride the dirt jumps too? And they're like, oh yeah, we'll throw your name on there. You know, like, it was no big deal. Right. Whereas nowadays you have to get an invite. You know, like, it's a lot crazier. But back then it was just like, oh yeah, I could see you doing that. Go for it. And then went through practice, was having a lot of fun, went through qualifying, and then I ended up qualifying first. And I did not expect that. I didn't, like, it wasn't even on my radar. And when the scores came in, I was like, whoa. Okay, so I'm riding against all these guys that I've seen in the magazines, looked up to, videos, the whole deal, and now I'm the guy that they're looking at on the target of my back. Like, this doesn't make sense, right? So instantly, like, I went from like having fun to like being a nervous wreck, you know. Like, the next day, just couldn't do any of the stuff I was doing over in practice, and it was just, ended up getting third, which is still incredible. But like, you know, once I had that taste of like, well, now I know that I could do this. Like, so from that point on, it was just like, I really just wanted to do well. And every time you went to a competition, that challenge of, you know, like, okay, I've done all these tricks at home. Like, can I do it when they point at me and say, do it now? Your turn, know? Yeah. So it didn't matter where I was or what I was riding, that challenge, and to this day, that's still a big challenge, is like being able to do that when it counts, you know. And that's what makes, I feel like, a true competitor, like, or a talented competitor, like a real competitor, because like, anybody can take 3 tries and try to do something and pull it off once, but when you have all eyes on you and the cameras and everything, and you have the clock ticking and the sponsors watching, whatever else, like, being able to pull it off in that kind of situation is incredible, you know. So for these guys that do it on a regular basis, like, it's something, and they make it look polished, and make it look like they're not even like thinking about it, you know.
You mentioned the X Games. What did at the time when it first came out, it was the Extreme Games and then changed to the X Games. What did that do for your sport and then ultimately your career? Would you be where you are had that not happened?
I don't think so. I mean, the X Games was a pretty pivotal part of our sport, pivotal time, really. It was our first kind of taste of, or really not our taste, but like giving the mainstream people, like household, like just giving them a taste of what our sport was, you know, and it took off like a rocket ship. Like it was crazy. Like that time in the sport was just like the growth was incredible. You know, like there was TV time, there was major sponsors. It was just like, you know, people were making a living off of the sport when before, like, I mean, there was a dead period like in the early 90s, and then before that there was, you know, a lot of stuff going on in the 80s. But like, you know, this was like the resurgence of like the biggest time in BMX that we had ever seen, you know? So without X Games and ESPN and all the media that came along with it, it was like, wow, like they really did us a favor by kind of putting us on there.
And it really, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it really, I mean, the young generation was the one into BMX, but it really open that up to a different generation of maybe the older people who didn't know much about it, but who are going to watch the Olympics because it says Olympics on it.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, the Olympic movement now, like, I'd like to think of it as like, you know, on that same level of what ESPN did for us with the X Games, you know, like the fact that we're in there and now it's like going to bring it to that broader audience. And from everything I've heard, we have a really great TV spot. You know, like some of these sports are on at 2 a.m., you know, so like, but we have some pretty like good TV slots. So it's like, well, this is a really awesome opportunity for us, you know, and to have us in the Olympics in the first place, it was a bit of a squeeze. Like, we're only really allowed this first time around 9 men and 9 women from the entire world. So it's not a big field.
Right.
So in my mind's eye, and I'm on a bunch of different committees from this Olympic thing because I was very passionate about making sure it was done right. You know, I just didn't want it to be fall into the hands of someone that was an opportunistic person that was just going to like get in there, make some money, and just not really care about the end result. My thing was like, okay, if we have 9 men and 9 women, like that's not a really true representation of, you know, the field, because essentially, if you think of it, you could have the number 3 guy not go to the Olympics in the world, you know, like, so it's like, well, this is really tight. So I wanted to make sure it was just the best show possible. You know, at the end of the day, the Olympics is a TV show. They need the ratings, they need people to watch. So it's like, well, let's make it the best possible show we can. So everything from the course design to whatever riders get selected to go in there, like they're going to put on the show that is going to make people go like, oh my gosh, like these kids are incredible.
Like snowboarding did, like so many of these other sports in their first time.
Exactly, you know, and the Olympics is looking for that younger demographic, and we hit that demographic. So it's like, you know, if we can go out there, put on a good show, make people like wow and just be like, that was incredible, and you know, nobody does anything crazy while they're out there, like I'm really hoping that we have a very long life in the Olympics, because, you know, like I said, the ESPN, the X Games, it brought in this like, I don't know, just burst of energy and life into the sport, and I'm really, really hoping the Olympics has a very similar thing, because those Olympic rings are powerful, man. When you're associated with that, like a lot of things start happening. Yeah,
and can you give folks an idea of how much training goes into it? Because everybody rides a bike. I mean, you have the training wheels, and you try to ride a bike from the time, in your case, you're 3. So everybody knows what riding a bike is like, but nobody, except the very select few, know what it's like to go up a ramp, circle around, flip a wheel, and everything else like that.
Yeah.
There's got to be a lot of training to it.
There is, and that's where, you know, the crashes come into. You know, like it's like anything, you fail, you know, and you might be in the air, you might be on the ground, but you fall over and you get back up and you do it again. But like, I mean, imagine doing that over the span of 6, 7, 8 years to even get to the point where you're trying these tricks, and that's not even mastering them. That's just like getting the courage to try it, you know. So a lot of the guys out there, you know, like some of the veterans have been riding for, you know, 15 years, and they're still progressing and still learning things. One of my biggest assets that I always tell people is like, I am really good at crashing. I am amazing at crashing. I'm not, and this is something I will brag about all day long.
The ones I've seen, you are laughing half the time.
And some of them are ridiculously fun. Like honestly, the best ones are where you're sliding and you've gotten on your elbow pads and knee pads, and you're just sliding like that. It's like, this is incredible. I mean, you never set out to do that, but like it's happening. And I always say like, learning how to crash a trick is just as important as learning how to pull it, because it's going to happen. Like you're going to fall down, but if you know how to react and you know how to like, you know, move your hand or make those split second decisions that put you in a better situation to walk away unscathed, that gives you longevity. It gives you the experience, I mean, body awareness, all that stuff. So a lot of these veterans and people that you see that are going to be in the Olympics, you know, have taken their fair of crashes, but they know how to crash. And it's a skill that is like, if you are perfect every single time and you never crash.
What good is that?
When you crash, it's going to be a disaster. Like, I mean, feet are going to be flying, you know, like gloves are going to pop off. It's just like, you have to know that part of it too. And that's what these riders have, is they have the ability to do these crazy tricks, but also they can crash them and get away.
I saw a video, and you're all over the place. Videos of you are all over the place. Just go to YouTube and hit Ryan Nyquist, and you're going to have
or Instagram
videos.
too. Instagram has a lot of them
all over
too.
the place. It was a video of you, I think, at Whistler.
Okay.
All right. And you're going down this, and you got the camera on, and you're saying as you're going down, I'm so scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it fear, or is it just scared of what might happen, or fear of the unknown? Because you've got to overcome fear just to start the momentum down the hill. But to say you're scared like that and then go out and do what you do, to me, is just phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of nailed it. I mean, it's a little bit of everything, you know, like fear of the unknown, fear of what you know could happen. You know, that particular one was, I spent about 3 years doing mountain bike professionally, slopestyle, and that was one of the biggest courses I've ever ridden. You know, so it's like, that was probably one of the few times I went through it, and it's terrifying. It is. Like, I mean, some of that stuff is just you're dropping 18 feet and you're like, I think this is going to work. Like, is the speed all right? And you're like paying attention to these guys that have done it for years, and they know every bit of it. You know, they're polished professionals, and that's where I'm trying to be. But I'm watching, like, you know, how many times they pedal. Like, what do they do when they go off the lip? Are they pulling? Are they pushing? Like, all these little things. So yeah, when I make that video and I say I'm a little scared, like, that's not a lie. Like, there's a part of me that's just like terrified, but there's also a part of me that's like really, really excited and having a lot of fun, you know? So it's like, the fear is there. I mean, it's like when you drive fast in a car, right? There's always a little bit of something there that you know could happen, but like, it's fun.
Yeah, but you've got a couple of 1,000 pounds of lead around you on a car.
Yeah, but that's where
you've got pads and a helmet.
That's where learning how to crash. And the other thing too is, like, I mean, I'm not out there with a bunch of other riders, so it's just me going down. But yeah, I mean, that is part of it. But that's what makes it exciting too. Is like, you're pushing your own limits. You know, like you know it's possible, and in the back of your head, you also know that you're capable. But there's always that little bit of like, you know, hey, are you sure? Are you absolutely sure about this? You know, and it's always the first try. And even a lot of the women I coach too, like, that breaking through that first try of whether it be a trick or going through a course or hitting a jump. That's the terrifying part. But if you trust yourself, and if you're not going to do anything you know you're not capable of, the second you go off and you do it, whether you crash or you land it, it's like that fear goes down. But what comes along with that is that building of confidence. You know, so you have to get that first try on anything. I mean, it's not just bikes. It's like anything in life. You go through it one time, all of a sudden you're like, what was I so scared of? Like, that wasn't that bad.
Anxiety is the worst part.
Exactly. You know, and if you let that build up, then it becomes like debilitating. But if you just go ahead and be like, I have the skills, I'm capable, let's just do it, and you kind of turn off the brain, then you can get like a lot of stuff done. But that's a hard thing to do sometimes.
What did becoming a dad do for you in your profession? When you're single, you can do that kind of thing, and you're doing flips, and it's just you. But when all of a sudden, I know when you got married, it's one thing, but when you have children and people who depend on you as a dad, did that in any way, shape, or form make you a little more cautious? Does it more difficult to concentrate because you know son number one has got soccer practice or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, like I won't lie, at some point, like, that does factor in and you start thinking about that stuff, but then you have to push that to the back burner. You have to, or else you're basically inviting like a crash or a fall or an injury, because if you're not 100% thinking about what you're doing, then, you know, like, you're giving yourself a pretty large percentage of the fact that you could fall and get hurt. So, you know, when I did have kids, it was like, okay, yeah, like, I'm responsible for people now and they count on me, but at the same time, like, you know, this is what I do for a living, so I can't let that stop me. You know, like, I can't let that completely stop me. Am I aware that it's dangerous? Of course. Like, you know, walking on the street's dangerous. You know, it's like,
and driving in Wilmington is dangerous.
Yes,
You've learned that too.
5 o'clock in Ogden, it's rough. But yeah, it's you know, it's part of it. But honestly, the probably the biggest part that was adjustment for me was just the managing of time. You know, when I had the kids and they got old enough to where they had, you know, preschool, regular school, whatever it was, after school activities, it's like, managing that time, juggling it to where like you get to spend time with them, you're doing quality stuff with them, quality stuff with their wife, you're still just able to spend quality time doing your job and riding. I mean, this day and age, it's like a lot of it's social media, so being able to spend time and, you know, respond back to people that comment on your posts, like all that kind of stuff, it's a big juggling act. And it still is. Like every year that goes on, we add more activities, there's more stuff. It's like learning how to do it all. And I love being able to ride with other people when I do practice, but really this day and age is like I ride by myself. And I have this thing in my hand that has all the information on there. So if someone walks back there and sees me unconscious, they can call somebody. And that's the reality of it, is like I have to take those risks. But, you know, I also had to learn how to do that, you know, like kind of be self-sufficient, not have to rely on like, can I get someone else to ride with me there? Like, it's like, no, I just go out there and I self-motivate.
When did you realize that you were among the best in your sport? Was there a competition? I mean, you won 3 championships. I have the dates here, 2007, 2009, 2013. You were the SB Best Action Sports Athlete winner in 2004. But was there a competition that you may have won that you said, okay, I wanted to do this for a living. I think I've arrived, as it were?
You know, I don't know if there was one competition. I mean, that moment came when like I used to work at this place in California called Jiffy Market. And it was like a corner kind of liquor store, grocery store. And my older brother worked there, I worked there, my younger brother worked there. And so it was like kind of like our family went there, we got candy there, you know, it was like that was like kind of the staple part of our neighborhood. So I got a job there, and I remember getting like my first offer to ride for a company, like a sponsorship. And I remember like crunching the numbers and going like, well, I get paid, you know, $250 a month, like, or whatever it was. And I was like, okay, so if I made $300 a month, I could quit this job and I could just do this. And like, you know, that's high school. I'm like, oh, that's like gas and McDonald's for days, whatever I was doing at the time, you know, like that's all I needed. It was everything else taken care of.
At that age, yep, that's all.
No cell phone, no nothing, like health insurance. I mean, like, you know, just living. But yeah, and that was kind of the moment where I was like, wow, like this is really a thing, you know. And then being able to like go through that contract and do well enough to where like, you know, I had multiple offers. And at that stage, it wasn't really one competition, but I can say like that was the kind of point where it was like turning point for me. So to say where I was the best rider, no, back then it was like I was really hustling to try to do well. It's such a weird thing to say that you were the best rider at the time, but there was one year where I literally won everything I entered. And I think that was like 2003 or something like that. And that was a pretty wild experience to just be like, wow, like, you know, walk into a competition and just know you have a really good chance of winning. Like that's a pretty amazing feeling, you know, like just, and the confidence is just on such a high that like, you know, it's. And
then see people say, that's him. That's
Nyquist, you know,
over there.
It's, I mean, and that stuff, it did happen, you know, there's a lot of notoriety, a lot of stuff, especially when you're at the events like X Games and stuff. You know, I was telling a story just the other day to one of my buddies, like leaving the event, I had to walk through, like, I think it was like in LA at the Staples Center or something like that. And we had to walk through the Staples Center where everybody else was ushered through. And I was like, dude, this is going to take forever. Like, I had my bike, my helmet, you know, it was me. They just watched me. So I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? So my older brother, who looks similar to me, I said, here's what we're going to do. You take my bike and put the helmet on, or like at least hang it. I can't remember if he had it on, but I was like, and walk like ahead of me, like 20, 30 feet. And you know where we're going, so but I was like, I'm going to hang back here, and I'm going to have my hat, and I'm going to pull it over my eyes, and I'm going to walk low, you know, just like, you know, not with you. Yeah. And he got people running after him, stopping him, all this stuff. And the second they would like kind of like, oh, sorry, like, yeah, I thought you were somebody else. And so I'm laughing. I'm just like, this is hilarious. But like, that's, you know, that was like a real thing. Like you had like a little taste of fame, you know. And I say little because it wasn't what a lot of these people have like as athletes, but it was enough to where I realized that like, hey, you have to like basically kind of treat it differently, you know. But a lot of responsibility with that stuff too, and that's honestly as a coach too. Like I'm looking forward to teaching these younger kids like how to be a professional. Because
that's part of it, yeah.
It's a big part of it, man.
Especially
like,
with social media now. That's got to be in your mind as far as getting them, don't get yourself in trouble here because it could hurt you here. Yeah,
and I mean, like, honestly, everybody is on social media, so judges, you know, organizers, all that stuff. And if someone, you know, sees something you posted and it's in a negative, you know, kind of way towards them or whatever they're doing, it's like, well, you know, like, you could literally not be invited back next year. Or like the second the judges get up in the tower, they could have like this really bad taste in their mouth with you, which would equate to like a lower score. I was like, I don't know, all that stuff just really matters nowadays. And it's like, you know, really the only private time you have is when you're like, the phone's off and you're sitting on your couch with your loved one or whatever, and you're sitting there, and that's like the only private time you have. Like, so it's like really, a lot of these kids are so glued to social media that it's like you have to like teach them what it means to like be professional on social media,
on and off,
you know,
yeah.
like, and that's honestly, like, that's a big thing for us. And I've explained that to like the guys that I work for. I was like, I really want them to understand what this means, you know, because to them it's like a really fun thing and stuff, but it will eventually affect what they're doing.
What's it like to play a video game and see yourself on it?
It's interesting.
But that's got to be a kick, though. That's got to be fun to kind of see that. Or did you have impact on what you look like and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, they were. It was a really cool process. Like, we went to up to this camp called Woodward Camp up in Pennsylvania, and they had all these like kind of cameras that would motion sensor captures, and you had like these really tight black suits, and they would Velcro like these reflective balls to you and capture what you're doing, you know, in real time. And so a lot of those moves, like on the video games, were actually us doing those moves. And we always joke because some of them looked really bad and be like, oh, I think that was you. I think you captured that trick, didn't you? And be like, no, you did that. I was like, no, I'm positive. I saw you do your no-hander and your arm was bent. Like, that was you.
That's funny.
But yeah, like, I mean, everything down to the clothes, like, you know, like the sponsors that we had.
And everything,
yeah, like it all meshed in. So like, it was a really cool experience. But like, you know, when you're in the middle of it, it's like you really don't know like the impact it's going to have. And still to this day, I have people sending me that have like, you know, either pulled it out and dusted it off and started playing. They're videotaping themselves playing as me. And I'll get people sending that to me like through my DMs. It's like, that's crazy, you know?
That's
so
funny,
it's like,
yeah.
you know, over like a decade and a half later, it's like, it's still happening, you know? And so it's like, wow, like I never would, I mean, yeah, video games, I know it's digital, it'll live forever, but it's just like, it's funny to like, even down to the music they used, like, you know, it's like, oh, that was in the game. I'm like, it was, that's right, you know? And that's like, that's ingrained in people's heads. Like, they spend a lot of hours playing those games and the soundtracks and everything. It's just like, it's really cool to see. And like, you know, like I said, even after all these years, like the people that it like, you know, now that like people in their 40s or older, it's like,
sure,
yeah, dude, that's cool. I remember playing that game.
And they may not
like,
have known who you were, but learned about you through that video game.
Yeah, a lot of times that's how it happened too.
Nyquist is a legend in the sport. When you read stuff like that, what do you think?
Honored, you know, like humbled. It's I don't know. It's a weird thing to kind of put yourself in that mindset to where like you can say like I'm a legend. Like it's such a weird like kind of state of mind, and I've never really had that state of mind. I've always just really enjoyed what I did, you know, and wanted to get to the next competition and ride well and push myself. So in some senses, like I don't know if I see myself like that or not. I just love the community I'm involved in. I love the people that I'm able to ride with, the places I'm able to go, and the challenge of it, you know? So like, I don't know, I've had success. I've had a lot of great memories and friendships from it, but you know, like, I don't know, it's such a weird thing to say legend, you know? It's just like, okay, well, if that's what you think, that's great. I'm just gonna keep doing my thing.
What do you do to relax? Some people ride bikes to relax. What do you do to relax?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's part of it too. Like just, you know, like I said, so much of it is social media now. So like when I go out and ride, it's like I'm trying to get like a video clip to be able to post or whatever, and I have my obligations. But you know, now it's become like that rarity where I can just go out and just like not worry about tricks, but just like get that nice floaty feeling through the air and just like that, feel the speed, and you know, just doing like the really basic tricks a lot of time is just really fulfilling and relaxing. And like if I can go out there and have like a really good session, like it almost sets me up to be like a better person for like that week. You know, it's like, it's kind of like when people go out and they have their weekend and they just go out fishing, let's say, and they catch a big fish. It's like, man, you run that high for a while, right? It's just like, it feels good. And so for me, it's, I mean, even though that's my job, it's like, that's my passion still too. So there's that. I mean, like obviously I love spending time with my kids. I took them to Greenfield yesterday, and we sweated out there in the morning. I didn't bring my bike. I just wanted to make sure everybody's having a good time and stuff. And that was great too. And that honestly, like having good times with them too, I get that same kind of high. You know, it's like, okay, like I'm doing something good here. I'm making an impact on their lives. Like, you know, but it's, you know, I don't know, like I really, there's not much else in my life that I like. I like going and doing stuff with my wife, going to see shows, you know, like.
Did you ever think that fatherhood would be such a kick before you were a dad?
You know, I thought I had it figured out, what it was going to be like.
No,
and any parent will tell you, like, if you say you've got it figured out, then you have nothing figured out.
Right.
And it's just like every day is truly like something changes, and so it's like I learned eventually, like, the best way to be is just flexible, and just kind of roll with the punches. And like, if you had an idea what your kid's going to be like, it's going to be the exact opposite, or just different in general. And so
somebody
it's like,
wouldn't have written a book about it by now, and nobody has.
I know. And so it's like, and I don't know. So it's been really fun. It's honestly been a huge learning experience for myself too, because when you start really looking at your kids, like, you start seeing bits of yourself too, and you're like, man, like, yeah, like you kind of got that from my side. Like, I get that. Okay. And then you can kind of reflect on like how you react to things and how they might be reacting to it. And, it's a pretty incredible thing. And I've always like kind of geeked out on like, what makes people tick, and so like finally really having kids, and you're like, okay, like, something happened at school. Like, what happened? Like, well, why? Let's break it down and help them kind of see it and start problem solving too. It's like, that's a really cool thing, but it's a challenge. Like,
do they know Dad's reputation? Do they know Dad is a BMX performer?
They do. We have ramps in the yard, so they know I ride bikes.
Right. But do they know of Dad's success, and do they want to maybe get into it as well?
They know a little bit of it, to the extent to where, like, like my middle son is probably the one that would probably follow my footsteps if he wanted to. He seems like he's really into it. I think he's slowly kind of realizing, like, that these professionals that stop by and then might ride the ramps from time to time and stuff, like, that's not a normal occurrence for the other, like, everyday person. But like, I'll tell my sponsor, he's like, you're sponsored? And I'm like, yeah, I'm sponsored. I've been sponsored for a while now. But like, he's slowly starting to realize like what is happening, and so that's a kind of interesting experience, because like, obviously, like, I don't have like a lot of trophies around. I don't have a lot of stuff like just like boiling over from those days. But like every once in a while, like, like there was action figures, like one of those will pop out somehow. Like, I don't know, I honestly don't know where it came from, but like all of a sudden the dog's chewing on my arm, and he's like, what is this? I'm like, oh, that's me, and he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, these things are made. And so eventually it'll start coming to the surface. But like, they've gone to competitions, when they were younger and stuff, and they've been around it, but like, I just don't know if they had that same impact of like, oh my gosh, that's my dad. Like, I think it was just like, Daddy, yay.
Yeah, that's the same thing with my kids. When my kids were going through school, being on TV, now, their friends knew me from being on TV. They didn't necessarily know I was the newscaster. They just knew Monica and Jonathan and Abby's dads on TV. Yeah. So when I would go in and have lunch with them, the other kids wanted to come, and it was cool when they were in elementary school. And when they started to get to middle school, it wasn't as cool. And then in high school, it's like, okay, Dad, you don't have to worry about coming anymore.
It didn't matter what you did, unless, honestly, I feel like if it was like Little Wayne's kids, they'd be like, Dad, get out of here. Like,
yeah, really.
Like, don't do that.
Gets to a point.
Yeah, so, but luckily I'm not there yet, so I can still enjoy them wanting me to go to lunch and stuff with them.
What do you hope to impress upon the athletes that you coach in Tokyo, and the whole, because you're taking them through the whole process. You're going through the championships, and then the games, and then the Olympics in 2020. So what do you hope to bring to these athletes? And then is gold what you won't settle less for? What's your mindset?
Yeah, for me, we have a really good chance of medaling. For the women, it's like we have a very good chance. We have really insanely talented group of women. On the men's side, I feel like we have a really good shot of medaling there too. It's just like, it's a lot more competitive on the men's side, and there's a lot more people that are really gunning for those spots. On the women's side, we probably have 4 women that and this is all from the U.S., that are capable of going to Tokyo. In the best case scenario, we're going to be able to send 2. So it's really competitive just in the U.S. amongst ourselves. So in that sense, yeah, I want to walk away with multiple medals, but I'm going to do my part. But I know as an athlete, it's tough, everybody's going to go there, and that's your one shot, so you want to make it count. So for me, I want to make sure I get them there. I want to make sure that they're in the right mindset, to be able to get them as calm as possible, so they can kind of reach that flow state where everything's just kind of happening and it's all natural. That's a really hard thing when you've worked for 2.5 years to try to get to this one event, because country pressure, family pressure, sponsor pressure, just having the people there watching, it's a lot. So for me, I think my biggest hurdle will be, when they're there, just keeping them calm, you know, keeping them confident, keeping them understanding what's happening, but also like just, you know, also trying to enjoy it, because it's a pretty rare opportunity for you to be able to go and represent your country. So, you know, all of that mixed in, you know, like just trying to get them there and have a good experience, you know.
And they're building for the future of this as an Olympic sport. This is the foundation for moving forward.
Yeah, the first year. And so, like, I mean, I know on our side the women are going to put on an amazing show. The men are going to be fantastic. It's just like, you know, it's just getting them there and getting them comfortable, because if someone shows up there and they're just a nervous wreck, like, I mean, it's like 80% of it is mental, you know, like if you're not mentally there, like your game's gonna be off.
Do you want them to be like you? Do you want them to kind of embrace your mentality, or do you want them to be themselves?
You know, I had great success being mentally strong and being able to be like, you know, up against the clock, you know, like basically like I need this run to be able to win, and having pulled it out like a bunch of times. So that part of it, I would love if they were mentally strong, because that would make everything easier for everybody. But you know, to say to be like me, I mean, everybody's so different, you know, like what worked for me sometimes doesn't equate for other people. Like there's people on the team that are like just insanely logical. They break things down way more than I ever did, and that makes sense to them, you know. So it's like, well, learning how people tick and then being able to offer any kind of advice that fits in the way they do it, that's kind of the way I approach it, because not everybody's going to fit into my box, you know, like, I mean, like that's just the way it works. So it's like, okay, well, if I can mold things to help fit into their world, well, I think I'll have better success as a coach, you know.
Well, they could not have anybody better than you as their coach. We wish you the very best. Ryan Nyquist, world champion, gold medalist, and now Wilmington, North Carolina resident. I hope we'd be able to contact you and talk to you as the whole process goes on.
Yeah, for sure. Hit me up. I'm in town most times anyways. If I'm not, then, you know, we can figure it out. But yeah, let's do it. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy, and good luck with the whole process, Coach.
Yeah, thank you.
A big thank you to Ryan Nyquist for carving out some of his very valuable time to sit down for this week's interview. He's a great follow on social media, especially on Instagram, where he posts a lot of his videos. And you can see many of his videos as well on his YouTube channel. Ryan's going to be working at his home ramp, maybe even bringing in some Olympic hopefuls to train here in Wilmington. And then he'll be traveling with the potential team members first to the U.S. Cycling Freestyle National Championships, and then to the Pan American Championships. Both of those events will be held outside of Raleigh in October. Now, before we go, I'd like to ask you once again, please subscribe to the One-on-One with Jon Evans podcast on whatever podcast app that you use to listen to your favorite shows. And if you would be so kind, please leave us a rating or a review. We really do want to know what you think of the interviews that we've done. And the more kind words that we get from you, the higher we'll be listed on the apps, and the better chance we have of bringing in some new listeners too. I'm Jon Evans. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of One-on-One.